First of all, good morning, everybody. Because whether we talk about impermanence or not, our upcoming weather is certainly bringing it to mind. Let's recite the lineage prayer to begin.
Let it. Yesterday, we left off with the Shibarebe, with the fourth of the Ngabare, with the fifth of the 10 necessary things, which was one needs to come to realize the wisdom of one's guru through intelligence, faith, and diligence. And now we turn to the next one, which is that one needs to ensure that one's body, speech, and mind are not sullied by wrongdoing or defects by using the faculties of mindfulness, vigilance, and circumspection. The first of these three faculties that we need to employ as Dharma practitioners is mindfulness, which means that practitioners must always be assessing their own behavior. Am I practicing virtue? Am I engaged in wrongdoing? And so forth. We must frequently ask ourselves these questions. The three faculties work together. Mindfulness is simply being aware or mindful of what you are doing. Vigilance is the faculty that enables you to recognize when mindfulness has been lost. For example, I have been engaged in wrongdoing, and so forth. And circumspection is to be careful in everything you do, in every action or deed of body, speech, and mind. And we need these faculties in order to practice virtue in general and Dharma in particular. Through the application of these faculties, we can ensure that our bodies, speech, and minds remain free from wrongdoing and other faults or defects. Wrongdoing, of course, means actual things that one does that are inappropriate with body, speech, and or mind.
다 주버디 고자당 인도지 이담 땡징 축투버지고스.
That was the fifth. The sixth one is, it is necessary to be independent and stable in one's practice through the possession of both armor-like diligence and courage.
다 고자스들가마 랑기 네삼라 인도 야보시고요레 땅가 내가 대 제주고레 다 더드나 랑기랑 담자 템버지고요레.
Armor like diligence and courage refer to an attitude of confidence. That confidence that thinks, I can do it, comes from an unconditional commitment to whatever it is.
다 고자당 인도 대드네 가르쳐주고 그래서나 네 딜라테네 이담스도다 지당 하나서 남주 이담스도가 하도 두긴선데 담자더버레 네 딘데 템버시고 그래서 딱 디바데 빵긴 겨워도 두긴 네 하나한테 다지 대추버스도가 네 사자직라 다 아랑 로숨라 잠되게나 로숨 자자자다마 대투 그래 삼데네 하나이 삼라 인도된데 지고 그래 많아 네 지금 뒷잠마다 내가 가르쳐 가나 간지나야 디 제투 그래 삼데 인도지고 그래.
The word for our commitment that is generated by this courage and by this armor used here is yidam, which of course we typically use to refer to the deities to whom we have committed ourselves. Yidam really means a promise or vow of the mind, and it means that you need to have this unconditional and unreserved commitment. For example, I am going to abstain from wrongdoing. I'm going to engage in virtue. Or if you're entering a 3-year retreat, I'm going to remain here for 3 years and practice as best I can, and so forth. All of this is what we call a stable commitment in the mind.
다 축마토바데 되네 가브레 되네 제 냠렌제가제 가브레 가와 가서 참 되네 사제직라 잔 에마토바데라 축마토바서 되네 사제직라 되네 대추바데라 축투바스 다 축마토서.
Lack of independence refers to the fact that this commitment is unwavering regardless what happens, regardless where you are. The opposite of independence is where you fluctuate. For example, you can't stay put. You go from place to place, you go from mental state to mental state without any control. The opposite of that is true independence, where you can stay put within your commitment.
다 랑기 일라 담자 템보지 아니 여설베절라 아니 가르선 대땡란 초토바 네토바지 고그레스 디갑서다 담자데다 개워주긴 디바방이 인선 남자들 고그로 왔다다 갑서라.
So on the basis of a stable commitment within your mind, you then have to be able to stay put, to stay focused within that in the practice of virtue.
또 듬버디 창매 셈메디 쩌베 나다 밀라 마셔로지 그스.
The seventh necessary thing is it is necessary to live without attachment and without craving so that your nose rope doesn't end up in others' hands. Now the nose rope, nose rope means when a domesticated animal or livestock animal has a ring through their nose, and there's a rope attached, a tether attached to that ring. So if you pull the animal by the rope, because the ring pulls against there's a word for this thing between the two nostrils, but I forget it, nostrum or what? Septum. It pulls against their septum, and naturally they don't want their septum to be torn off, so they follow the rope. If we, so not being independent not being free from the influence of others is called putting your nose rope in others' hands.
다디지단 컬처가 차도 갑슬라 난 에시아라데 룩소데 요레 그란즈메디 고스웨데 스칼라가 보여요.
맞아요, 여러와.
요레.
생각보다 요와 인생을 요리다. Rinpoche said this is an Asian way of speaking that may be unfamiliar to you, but I pointed out that we have farms too, so there must be domesticated livestock with nose ropes.
다 창매 심매스도 간라 균을 논절라 자신 전부 맞제스 그냥 코르 년시 그래서라야 셈바 전부 맞제스 요래.
So non-attachment or freedom from attachment, freedom from craving means not to be greatly attached to or obsessively attached to wealth, possessions, entourage, and so forth.
다 딘디 빼디 가르샤스나 내 섬진들라 빼샤네 착보 첨보여나 착비 제수 장거래 스티나생기 내 섬진디 나다 잡잖아 나다 가와 단서 디젤라 장 조금만나 콜라 라와요 말레스 내가 알아서 착보 첨보스단 셈보 첨보여나 착보단 셈비 제수 장 조고래.
And the connection between the idea of freedom from attachment and the nose rope of livestock is that just as the animal has no control over where it goes, it's led by the nose. In the same way, if you're attached to something, you lose your independence, you lose your self-sufficiency.
다 데발라 요시기르다 다 먼저 샤조라 점점 된대요래. 아니 밤학경 거도 정하다 즉 기절 제고 삼교회 때 땡야랑 보고기 보고 따고도 나랑 보고 지나가 강날도 대따고도 당가 개화제 그거가 라기면도 쓴다 보고라 착받아 셈바 요래 근데 제도 가나 근데 뒤에 왕라 쇼도 요래 근데 개화도 요 말에.
I don't know if this happens in this country, but sometimes in Asia, for example, excessive concern over one's children or grandchildren can actually become a cause of losing independence. One can think, well, I would like to practice, but I really need to focus entirely on my children's welfare or my grandchildren's welfare and so on.
다들라 랑라 랑와메 바로 차네 대 군줄라 차이데 같은 랑라 착바요레 셈바요레 된당 대야보서고도 대기보 째고도 다 디입니다 냠바제 제고도 삼내 삼라 서로디 쇼청보여도 내 군조 갈레카 군줄라 강할 때도 셈기 속여 말에.
So basically what happens is because you've become so focused on making other people perfectly happy, then you are at risk of being enervated and disappointed every time there's a fluctuation in their state of happiness. Which can obstruct your opportunity to practice.
다 마마드는 약사래. 다 제버디 정말 제스문제 선비 따도 총리 써볼라. 전부시kus.
To move on, the eighth necessary thing is to diligently and continually gather the two accumulations in the within the template or format of the preparation, the actual thing, and the conclusion. In other words, the format of what's called threefold goodness.
단 남준 알아서 들어와서 되가라 차시 더버지. 그냥 같은 데 저고도 그냥 뭐서 저거 내가 더 줘봐. 그냥 제제디 내가 더 줘봐 더버지. 그냥 알아서 냠는지 되가라 콜라 가리고서는 들어와달라. 잠도 심제다 삼바상보 진에 남가다 냠베 심년 담지 된들라 냠는 제교 삼는 뭐시 난 냠는 가라 맹맹이고네 냠는 제고보다 된 동교래 나 쇼들라야 삼바상보 거네 방에 사샤베 겨와데 남가다 냠베 심년 담자라 토브로 쇼 삼네데 뭐와데 잡 고요래.
In the most generic sense, beginning, middle, and end can really describe any intentional action. We start out by planning or intending to do something, like, for example, go somewhere. Then we actually do it. And then at the end of doing it, it's done. We've reached there. In the specific context of Dharma, this has the more specific meaning of referring to the conscious generation of one's intention before practice at the beginning of a session by going for refuge and generating bodhicitta, giving rise to the thought, I'm going to practice this, whatever it is, for the benefit of all beings. Then doing it with that in mind, and then at the end, dedicating the virtue of the practice to the awakening of all beings. That's what's called threefold goodness, or the template, the practice template of beginning, middle, and end.
Then dijala jomwe jesum jesme takdos kaduna choni sobala zomba shigus da meji sonam je soda me shi ji choni sabala ne chunju ji gores that is ungyore.
And then in the same point, Lord Gampopa says, in that way, or in that format, we need to constantly, continually, gather the two accumulations with diligence. The two accumulations are the conceptual accumulation of merit and the non-conceptual or non-referential accumulation of wisdom.
Tan din de jek sonam je sosa la de ngaran so kunjo ten de zola choba phoye ta se yunja phoye nare medo phoye nare phoye nare chaasale nare nya kora jabe nare de so sonam je sosa re yang man nyelong la chimba dance de chobo de zola ne che nyam thaba de zola ingje ki kone ne che program che anda ana shingi tinga jang che lobra dang denjalaya sheyun mengan de so robo che de zo ne den ngaran zo marang gyula ne so nam je chozo ye che de la ne jana zo robo che de zo de an tribu yoba de chagyore.
What are the things we can do to accumulate merit? For example, any type of offering we make to the three jewels, such as when we offer water bowls or flowers or incense or anything like that, or performing prostrations or circumambulation. Also, any time we are generous to those in need, that accumulates merit. And any time we help someone else, for example, helping someone with their studies, or helping them negotiate a difficulty, and so on. These are all ways of accumulating merit.
Da hinayang samjot namda kores sambod yang arangla kependang ming lendang lenla rewatang ming nyendala samna yang samjot namda chagyo mare.
However, we must be careful and make sure that both our intentions and our performance are pure. For example, with regard to intentions, we can't do something meritorious for the sake of a good reputation or fame or some kind of personal payback.
Da din de ne che sonam je chode na ngara nyamlen do ba che na ya idam je la kerem lo so ba khom ye ne che che je chode ne kerem da nyam do ting ye zin yang da ba ju la che ne ne te ting ye zin la ne ye de la ko pyo la yang zo rim khom ye de so ne yi ji cho la cha do pyo re ne ngara so nam chen shin ne da ha dong khom ne da te la te ne ting ye zin ju la che ba la te ne yi ji cho chun yi ne lo de so to yong pyo la.
In terms of practice, we principally gather the accumulation of merit through the practice of the generation stage, the visualization of deities. But at the same time, we are also gathering the accumulation of wisdom by resting in the samadhi of the generation stage. We also gather the accumulation of wisdom through the practice of the completion stage and through practices such as tranquility and insight.
Dan di kubati chambadang ningje ngösam gyune semjenje dönla lochoba shigus.
The ninth of the 10 necessary things is, it is necessary to actually, to both directly and indirectly concern oneself with helping others, motivated by love and compassion.
Da dana didaboje dana peja ti ane sumbobo ane nyame dabor mo jona la samlo tangba na yang dana kunanji to zawa inji chimbe ngangne dana ngoso kuranda dewa yebe dana maranzo ane kaju koma nambare dana da chizu 균에 들바 다 로메 균이다 당한테 튀네 나랑서 냠내라 공내 공이다 다 된주도 좀바로와 되네 균이 펜도고 나랑서.
For example, if we put this in the context of Gampopa's own life, those whom he helped directly were those who, with great love, he taught and assisted and facilitated the practice of in his life. And those whom he helped indirectly are people like ourselves who are receiving the teachings that he set down so many years ago, but that are still available to us now.
다 딘나신게 나란서 섬진실라 되네지 참비심 제외지심 다 된데기 고네 되네지 바르볼라 펜비심기 무엇으로 보제도 나야 무엇으로 보제 되네 무엇으로 보제 맞음 나야 되네 균이 바르보들 간데스 펜다고 살에 되네 간데스 펜비 탑시 간데스 제고살에 섬다 된데기 섬도 다인디 계정부레시.
In our case, directly helping others refers to when we're motivated by love for other beings and we actually are able to assist them or help them in any way. Indirectly helping them refers to when we cannot directly help them, we still need to consider how we might be able to help them in the future.
다 섬진지 전로 로초보시 그 초그림해봐 섬진 탐젤라 펜토버쇼 섬네 샘버상보시 고그레스.
And Gampopa concludes this point by saying we need to turn our minds to helping others, to helping beings. And that means all beings with an attitude of impartiality.
다 너나 장조지 샘디 고래 잡으죠 순교래 장조 샘기 주대 잡아다 닝제래 대인도 잡아다 닝지 니당 대미관에 신변질로도 제교래 대인도 남가다 냠비 섬전 탐제라 도지상부 제고고래 장조 샘 제고고래 스텔 순교서래.
We can sum this ninth point up as simply saying bodhicitta is necessary. We need to cultivate love and compassion that make us actually benevolent toward others, and not just some others, but all others. And benevolence toward all others must become bodhicitta.
단주보디 셰랍당 고도지 최담제 뭐다 세마는 마셔 보시 그.
The 10th and last of the 10 necessary things is through wisdom, understanding, and realization, we need to not stray into the reification of and a fixation on the attributes of phenomena.
단디인데 랑돌 스나레 양이지 예워 제시비 셔랍 다든지 셔랍데 남중 알아서 빼졌다 되라 tö비 셔랍 삼비 셔랍 곰비 셔랍 스네든 tö발라 때니 고어티기요래 고아스데 네 들라 삼바당 곰베 냠술 렌디 갑살라 네 냠레 망보 지도 간라데네 담보 냠파 냠데 간담 똑발라 좋네 네 도줄라 템보 네데 주로메바 제자보 랍다보다 가도 겁나 지바 용들라 똑바스기요래 네 최담 네 똑바 총 네 식배 다신 지도 간라 네 최담지지 인룩가리엠바데 하고 네 근데 왕한테는 제단기 가서를 3만 마셔 가지고 그래서 내로 하고 가지고 그래서 셔랍되기다.
So what he is saying here is that we need to apply wisdom. Now wisdom starts out as a correct understanding of what to do and what not to do. Traditionally we define wisdom, however, as the wisdom of hearing, the wisdom of thinking, and the wisdom of meditating. The wisdom which arises from hearing and the wisdom which arises from thinking about what we have heard produce a kind of understanding of the nature of things, how things are. But then when we practice meditation directed by that understanding, first we gain transitory experiences or glimpses of how things are, which eventually are superseded by a stable and unchanging realization that is as stable and unchanging as a mountain, which is to say that whenever you meditate, the realization is there and is the same, is unfluctuating. By applying wisdom and developing wisdom in these stages, we need to avoid the misapprehension of things as truly existent, avoid what is called the reification or imputation of reality to phenomena, and avoid the misapprehension of their perceived attributes as inherently existent.
다 참말 쇼로 와서 되가라 말한다나 사사 또또 추다 된들라 진네 출네 로친질로도 되네 네로디 동니바 되네 마주바에마다 하마고 와지네 된들라 출데 그래 될라 참말 쇼로 와서 다 네로디 샤랍기 되네 고원니 냠도기 똑바 충용도 된데서 당신이 마주바 된 kenyon 되는 참말 마주로 용교래.
To get lost in the reification of attributes is to think or believe, as we commonly do, that things are what they appear to be. Earth is earth, stones are stones, and they are what they appear to be inherently, and they really exist. The only way that we can overcome this is by discovering in our own understanding, experience, and finally realization that things have no true existence. Once you discover the lack of true existence of phenomena, then the tendency to impute reality to their perceived attributes becomes irrelevant. So those are the 10 necessary things we really need. Next, we have the 10 things on which we need to rely, or the 10 things we need to support us. The first is we need the support of a holy guru who is both realized and compassionate. And this is what we were talking about yesterday when I said that we need the support and guidance of a good guru who is called a holy guru. The purpose of acquiring such a guru's support is that in their presence you receive their practical instructions, which enable you to gain the same experience and realization that they have gained. The beginning of this point, Gampopa says that the guru or lama on whom we rely must have two things. They must have realization and they must have compassion. There are lots of lamas, and it's fine that there are lots of lamas, but not all lamas have realization. If you're going to rely upon someone, they must have realization. If they have not realized dharmata, reality, then in spite of their good intentions and their compassion, they cannot guide you. On the other hand, there are lamas who have realization but have little or no interest in guiding others. They are not necessarily truly uncompassionate, but they may be discouraged and they may think, well, there's no point in my trying to teach, I'm just going to remain in isolation and practice. Such a person cannot guide you because they will not guide you. So it's necessary that the guru on whom you rely, whose support you seek, have possessed both realization and compassion.
That the lama tsini ni da boje. Then lama de tamba imba tanchik. And lama de tujul as a lama de tokba dan temba tanchik. Ningje dan temba imba. That the need to.
So the real point here is the qualifications of a guru. And the qualifications are two. They should be realized and compassionate.
Then this shall let Dhamma Kare Nanayang, the Zorangi Shune, Nakanto Jerang, Yamlen Chebana, Narangline, Yamna Topa the Kegres.
And if you receive the instructions of such a guru and practice them as best you can, you will give rise to experience and realization.
Then the Lame Colare, that nibody, the Sasaja Cola, Enshing, Nyam Kala, Jinchapi combatants.
So that first support or first thing is about the choice of a guru. The second one is about the environment in which you live and practice. Gampopa says, we require the support of a solitary and pleasant place endowed with blessing.
That the next sa embala tena, the Nekari or Sarashingi, Yangwa Mebachagure, then Yangwa Medu, then Rangi Kejur Kari, Chinayang, the Nekejorji, Rashingi Levium, the Yangwa Mamboy Salina, Tunla, Kandungi Pesa Chanayang, Kandunga Letu Mare, Demotai Kutang, that chain, Tromomosam like Keja, Tang, that in the lay Yang Dugre, Kandun Chetu Mare, Comchi Jawasamaya, the name Number Shatu Mareta, Nawala Tamida, Igla Tamida, Tonya, then Digital Yang Dugre, the Nechi, Ne Embalaton, the Nechi, Keja Tamida, Koju Meba, the Nechi Nawala Tamida, Mi Keja Tamida, Megova, the Migla Demo Tamida, Toya Medu, the Nesam de Rashing, Lulu.
What is the benefit of solitude? The benefit of solitude or isolation is that it is conducive to freedom from distraction. A state of solitude or isolation is simply a situation in which there are few distractions. When you are free from distractions, your mind can naturally engage itself with little difficulty in virtuous endeavors. When you are practicing in the midst of many distractions, it is much more difficult to do that. You may attempt to pursue a liturgical practice, meditation practice, and so forth in a distracting place, but you will constantly be distracted by other possibilities, the possibility of all sorts of entertaining spectacles, films, and so forth, of conversation, endless conversation. And all of our conversation, of course, brings distraction. If you live in solitude, then you won't see people. Not seeing people, you won't hear a lot of talk, which won't generate a lot of thoughts, and you will also have no choice but to practice because you'll have nothing else to do.
That time you just allow the Union Pummy, your more tips, Namiang Pummy, Kishongi Pells, that number youngs are made, Union Badala, and the number into Gurden, that number youngs are made, then Rashing, Kikiwati, Rashing, pay on Gures.
As it says in the 37 practices, by abandoning negative environments, your kleshas will naturally weaken. By abandoning distractions, your virtues will naturally develop.
That dilla, na engine Yamka, La Chinchabe, Combatant, La Ducala, then the Marbeki, Ilala, that ne Richetan, the Tangore, ne Embato Tangores, the Sonyora.
Here, the environment is defined as isolated or solitary, pleasant, and endowed with blessing. This is similar to the instructions Lord Marpa gave to Jetsun Milarepa on where he should go to practice.
tene che chinap chin tende re tene tende ki kumba de la kana so nyamlen chenayang nyamlen nyurpo yong ye tene karasna lama kumba nam ji je la cha ba ta che ne je ta da che ga ya de gang de la da che ji me la da ba phe sha ba ne de so la marang so nyamlen che ba na yang tene che ka ju kumba nam phe sha ba tene de la yang nyamlen de kana so nyurpo yong ye ki karasna kong nam ba ki tu ki molam chinap tende marang so la tene pento yong yus shi gyo re.
With regard to the third attribute, that it be endowed with blessing, that means a place like this. This place has been blessed by the Jawon Karmapa and by many other great masters. Their blessings remain here, so that when you practice here, your practice will develop more quickly than it would in a neutral environment. Or it can also refer to the isolated hermitages used by Jitsen Milarepa and our other Kagyu forebears. To practice in the places where they practiced is conducive to very quick progress because their blessings remain.
The
third support is rely upon companions who have the same view and behavior as yourself and who are trustworthy.
Dan tin ta ngarang chu chö chö kala tene chöding gi tobo kejor ki tobo ji tengo res tene na ya tobo de sambo ji ogores tobo sambo de la chengi di ngarang na tawa temba chöbo temba ji ogores tene ta lo tubas na ichi yerung ba ji.
Regardless of your particular practice situation, you do require the support and the friendship of others. And it's therefore of great significance to carefully choose whom you're around. They should be people who have the same outlook as yourself and who have the same lifestyle, who practice and live the same way as yourself. Because in that way, their outlook and their behavior will support yours. If they have a different outlook, then you'll be in constant conflict. One will say it's time to drink a sip of water, and the other one says no, it's time to eat a meal. One will say it's time to stay here, and the other one will say it's time to go. That's not much fun. If both of you are enthusiastic about your practice and inspired by, for example, this temple and so forth, when you enter into it, you're kind of on the same page and things will go much better. However, it's not enough that the companions you surround yourself with have the same outlook and lifestyle as yourself. They also have to be trustworthy. People can have the same outlook and same lifestyle, but be deceptive and manipulative. They may be speaking nicely to you and appearing to behave in a way that's companionable because they want to trick you and get something out of you. So they need to be people you can trust.
So
this sort of thing you know more about than I do because most or all of you have families. Then the next one is recognizing the defects of stuff or necessary provisions have well, you'd say, be content.
다 대기 당보 남았던 이버 대사된 숨바 조보된 다 나란조된 류초의 날에 샘대기 요의 날에 다 좋았던 거래.
The first of the 10 supports was about our guru, the second about our practice environment, and the third about our companions. This fourth one is about the stuff we need, the provisions or necessaries we need in order to live.
다 처바인데 에너지 소유 유지라 가장 자신 진보제나 깨나는 견차기 요래.
What's meant by the defects of stuff is that from the point of view of a practitioner, if you develop too much concern with or too much craving with the quality of your provisions and possessions, that becomes a problem.
다 딘디 추심벌 거슬랍니다. 제 소유지 견된신 추심벌 거스네. 당간한저 샤창 담아라 소벌라 밤에 버잖아. 드네지 드네 간잠지 창망 보통 된다버지나. 당보 다 가려스나 미상마랑라 지구로 통쳐버려나야 네 간잠지랑 알코올에 차도 미기 통매바 자기래 네 남미기 나양 네 간잠지네 네 랑라 통매바 자기래 네 랑라 울려나야 물상마 창기 세니 네 랑 규배줄 삼지야 냠도 그래 네 고토보 삼지장 간잠지네 랑라 되네 야보지기 말에 고창동에래 슬람네 네 제 도로 연구요래 된 된대지도가 꽤 망보지 연구요래.
In short, know when enough is enough, and don't get carried away with enjoyments, such as meat, alcohol, and tobacco. To use alcohol as an example, if someone drinks a lot and eventually becomes an alcoholic, they start to become estranged from their friends and family, because they are very difficult to deal with. They spend all their money on alcohol, and finally they lose the respect that they may have had up to that point of their community. A Dharma practitioner should be content with the bare necessities, such as the poorest food and the shoddiest clothing. On the other hand, if you go too far in that direction, if you eat food that is not nutritious or healthy, and if you wear clothing that does not shelter you from the elements, then you will harm your body, which will deprive you of a necessary support for your practice, that is to say, a healthy body. The fifth one is having all of those four things together. How do you actually rely upon a guru, and how do you rely upon instructions? And the fifth one says, rely impartially on the practical instructions of the lineage of siddhas. The lineage of siddhas, or Kagyu lineage, has a whole lot of siddhas in it, a succession of siddhas. From one point of view, we can say it began with the Mahasiddha Saraha, or we can say it began with the Mahasiddha Tilopa. In either case, there are many of them, And they all had something to say that was of practical use. Much of their instructions were codified and condensed by Lord Gampopa in his teachings. The point is, we have to be impartial in studying their instructions. How do we approach this? We act like a hungry yak. In the summer, it will just go where the grass is. If the grass is here, it'll munch on the grass here. If it has to go over there to get grass, it'll go over there and eat grass. Just wants the grass. Simply put, what this means is you need to rely upon an experienced lama or guru and receive the instructions from them that they feel are going to be most helpful, most appropriate for you. And these instructions, which we receive from a teacher who has experience in realization, will include how, as ordinary people, we can approach this type of practice, how we continue it, how we deal with the various things that will come up in the course of our practice, how we dispel impediments or obstacles and sidetracks and so forth. And the guru, if he or she is genuinely experienced and realized, will be able to carefully select the instructions that will be most useful for each individual disciple. The sixth one is rely upon substances, medicine, mantra, and profound interdependence that are beneficial to you and others. What Lord Gampopa is pointing out here is we can't refuse, or we shouldn't refuse to make use of the resources that are at our disposal. For example, especially in cases of illness or other impediment, sometimes we need to rely on certain substances, such as medicine and so forth, or divination, or astrological diagnosis. And because all of these things are part of the interdependence, the profound interdependence of life. And therefore, we can't reject any of these things out of hand.
근데 셴라 책에 나랑 대소 땡고레스 당아 냠는 책이 대소 땡이메 대소 방에 남나 책이 말레스.
For example, it's less common here than in Asia, but sometimes there are people who have gained the healing power of mantra. In such cases, you go to them and you allow them to bless you and heal you with the power of mantra. In other cases, you have sought medical treatment for an illness, but it's not getting better. You might go to a medical astrologer and seek their diagnosis for what to do next, and so on. The point is, if any of these things are helpful to you or to other people, you can't reject them because out of a kind of purist thinking, oh, I'm a practitioner, I don't need any of that stuff. The seventh one is rely upon food and the upaya marga, or path of means, that suit your physical constitution.
subula pembe chedola ne kala inayang chema boyore kajala tsabo mate kajala tamo mate ta dende yore sede joina ne cholam la inayang ne damena mangboyore ne dende direnga tanda yoga jaye ta ta tunye mangbojido ta exercise damenda ne che mission damenda maranzo lyukam de boya chedola ne che rangla cheba tengores.
Basically, what this means is to pay attention to your health and live a healthy lifestyle. For example, people vary in terms of what type of food will suit them. For some people, hot food is hard to digest. For other people, cold food is hard to digest. You need to pay attention to your constitution and eat the kind of food that works for you. With regard to the Upaya Marga, this refers to things like the practice of Hatha Yoga, exercise, including using exercise machines for the sake of your health. So you all know more about these things than I do. Then the eighth is rely upon a dharma practice and a lifestyle that helps your experience. The point here is you need to act in a way, live in a way that allows your meditation practice, your experience to pervade your life. Whether you're lying down, walking, sitting, eating, talking, whatever you're doing, it needs to be done in a way that you can bring meditation into post-meditation.
nyamla no gyure ne chu nyamlen la pengyo mare dende member dende che lama yangda ba gewi shin den dezogi zejula dende teche de ngaranzo konamba gi ne karbo gewi ke jawa kona zum de kapsala ta teche so tangba na dende chi chulam la yang sumbu nangi dende shine da la dong nyamlen de so kombel joe ta dende yong.
For example, if we indulge in negativity, in attachment, aversion, and apathy, this does not help our experience. So we need to pay attention to, observe, and emulate the conduct of realized gurus and try to behave the way they do.
nyamla pendant ne segendi ne ngaranzo saja khaje da chula kang rabo tang ana ne chen kha rabo tang ne che chukang rabo la chodo kapsula rashin ge ne semde pa phe bo tang ne che deba da mu ya che yong yen rabo da de yong gyo re an de so de sem gi nyamla pen gyo re chon nang mi da wa che gyo re da yang che demon da me da chapsa ne che 다 쇼바 창동사 된다잖아. 내가 나서 냠디 네 최단 되면 냠데 제규어 말에 네 지딩기 자와들라 다 가서래 잉도교래 냠도 너교래 되죠.
And this also it consists of making good choices in terms of where we spend our time. Some environments will help our experience, foster it, nourish it, and others will harm it. For example, we may experience that when we go to great temples or other sacred places or hermitages or retreats, our minds settle. We feel at ease, and our faith and our diligence in practice naturally increase. On the other hand, if you spend your time in casinos and bars, it's going to harm your meditation experience.
나도 당이 된들라 내 가실라 저도 돌아감서 저도네 대나라야 밑에서 냠내 낭 검도 낭 럽선한테 말아야 되나 싶이 제거도 없었네 서로 감감 소적이 용도 하잖아.
One reason for this is that we tend to imitate others. So if you go to a temple where lots of people are practicing, it's going to make you want to practice too. On the other hand, if you go to a casino or a bar, you're going to want to start gambling and drinking. And then the eighth one is rely upon disciples who have faith and devotion and are therefore fit receptacles for dharma. Gupare. That's the ninth. The point is, when someone teaches, the people they teach need to have a basic trust in them. The disciples of a teacher need to have the attitude, this guru will teach me, and what they teach me will help me. If they have that attitude, that confidence, then the teaching will be effective. On the other hand, if they think, I don't know if he or she will be willing to teach me, and even if they do, I don't know if it'll do me any good, then not much good is going to come of this relationship. So the point is that if you, when you're teaching, if the students or disciples have faith and devotion, then you must, motivated by love and compassion, teach them. But before you teach, you need to examine the fitness of the students or disciples. And if they lack faith in the teaching or in you, then no good will come of trying to teach them. Students or disciples really need to be thirsty. They need to be like somebody who has not had a drop of water all day long and who, as evening approaches, cannot think of anything but, I need some water. If I drink some water, then it will quench my thirst. They need to be that thirsty for the Dharma. The 10th and last of the 10 reliances or supports is always rely on mindfulness and vigilance throughout the 4 activities.
Tachulam number she la tukala, the net, draw, cha, yal, and de la cuyora.
So the four activities really refer to four physical positions that make up most of our daily doings: walking, sitting, lying down, and standing. We're always doing one of those four things.
That parts of Taring Butrovicabina, that Yan Tatunsan in Garantana Chine Kundukala, Teravata Lola, Compajamni Yarzo, Marzo, Semulation, that and Regila Kudu, Yan Tatun Trobainare, Nyaltebi Cabinare, Landebi, Satun Garichebi Cablanayang, and the Temple Shishin Kugu is Kindu.
The point is, no matter what your physical activity or position is, you still need mindfulness and vigilance. For example, whether you're walking a great distance on a journey, or you're walking a short distance, as for example, doing walking meditation, as taught in the Theravada tradition. Whether you're lying down, or getting up, standing up, sitting down, no matter what you're doing, you still need mindfulness and vigilance. And the purpose of the application of mindfulness and vigilance is to make sure that you're engaged in virtue and not wrongdoing. The mindfulness that virtue is your intention, the vigilance that enables you to tell when you've become diverted into wrongdoing. So those are the 10 supports or 10 reliances, 10 things on which we definitely must rely. The next is 10 things that we need to give up.
So
whereas the previous list was all beneficial things, necessary things, these are things that are not only unnecessary, they're also harmful to ourselves and to those around us. The first is abandon masters or teachers who are motivated in everything they do by the 8 worldly dharmas. The first 2 of the 8 worldly dharmas are praise and censure or criticism. And the first sign that a teacher is someone you don't want to associate yourself with is if they're very sensitive to such. And they're very nice if praised, but not nice when censured or criticized. And then the second set of 2 is acquisition and non-acquisition. And this concerns offerings. This is when the teachers are very nice when they get lots of offerings and not nice when they don't. And then the third pair is comfort and discomfort. Whether they're at home or traveling and wherever they're staying, this is if they're nice and especially pleased when their situation is very comfortable or luxurious, and grumpy and displeased if it's uncomfortable or lacking in luxury. And the fourth pair of 2, completing the 8, is fame and lack of fame. That the teacher delights in becoming famous, becoming a big deal, and is displeased if they're not that famous. So any Lama who is like that, who is motivated by those 8 concerns, is unfit to rely upon and should be abandoned. Which means that you, as prospective disciples, need to examine the teacher before forming a relationship with them. The second thing to abandon is entourage and negative companions who harm your mind and your experience. The point is, you need to rely upon companions who accord with Dharma, and you need to avoid companions who are against Dharma. In the 37 practices, it defines negative companions as those whose company causes one's 3 poisons, attachment, aversion, and apathy, to proliferate, whose company reduces one's involvement in hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and whose company causes one's love and compassion to diminish. People like that are negative influences and should be avoided. Such companions will hurt your mind and harm your experience. And if things get bad enough, they may even harm you physically, because there's no limit to attachment, aversion, and apathy. People who are a negative influence, however, are not necessarily overtly malevolent, and in fact they may not be malevolent in their intentions at all. They may think that they're being helpful and friendly. But for example, those who discourage you from keeping the vows and samayas you have undertaken, even if they do so with, from their own point of view, the best of intentions, are a harmful influence. Under their influence, then you discard your vows and samayas, which makes you unhappy and unable to practice. So you need to really assess the effect someone's company has on you. If being in their company increases your attachment, increases your anger, and so on, then maybe you need to distance yourself from them. Now, this point is, of course, intended for those who are involved in intensive practice. And when it says entourage or retinue, it means, for example, the people who serve you in retreat and so forth. And it's important that those people not be disruptive to your practice. Then the next one is abandon you could say it can mean monasteries, but it can also mean, you could say monasteries or places, practice places, where there are many distractions and dangers.
당 나랑기 냠용토네 빼 잡으지도 샤바이나 먼저 난 카트만두를 대두갑슬라 마 자살라 초된라 연두가라 네 배절로도양시라 용교마라 암졸라 담면다고 깨담면다고 그 미고 깨고 그 모저기 깨고 그래 네 지 다나신 도보도도 네 내가라 양도도 네 지 라신기 줄라 네 간는 게 저대삼 제도고요 말에 다 여기 받아보 잡아라 동안을 전화 네 양사메디 가만한 조사베절라 배제 양만나 배제 말로랑로 양만나니 냠래 마제랑제 저 투용교 라신기 다데나제 양와 침보여서 방고레스.
I can speak about this from my own experience. When I was living at our monastery in Kathmandu, because the monastery is in the midst of what is now a fairly busy area, one was constantly distracted by the sound of automobiles, not to mention their fumes, and one would constantly bump into friends, deal with people, there were endless distractions. When I moved from there to the retreat at Bhaktapur, I found that there were far fewer distractions. Basically, you had two choices for what you were going to do. You could either study or practice. There's nothing else to do in Bhaktapur. For example, people might have the best intentions trying to meditate in the middle of Kathmandu, but you're trying to meditate and then, of course, you constantly hear music. So there's a pleasing song being blaring in through your window. You can't help but be distracted by it. So one needs to abandon environments that are distracting, because if you're in a distracting environment, you will become distracted.
뒤남식 말한게 소라양 행가 연구요래 다 대조사제들 때나 냠는 제마도 제나나 저장하나 되고잖아 냠는 연구요 말 대조양 빵고레스.
You also need to avoid places that are dangerous. For example, places where there are things in the environment, among the elements, that are harmful or potentially dangerous. Or places where there's a great deal of criminal activity and you're in danger of becoming a victim. Or places where predatory animals might harm you and so forth. Because your mind won't come to rest. If you know you're in danger, you'll be worrying about it, so you need to abandon such an environment. And you also need to abandon places where your superstitions regarding the place will cause your mind not to come to rest. This is very common for us in Asia, where if a place is known to harbor a powerful deva or naga or spirit, people will make a big deal out of every little sound they hear, thinking it's coming to get me, it's going to harm me. And if you live in such a place and you actually you feel that way about it, your mind's not going to come to rest. You should move. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, this precious garland of the Supreme Path is basically intended for beginners. And the prescriptions of place and so on are what is necessary for beginners. Someone with an extremely advanced practice, someone who has seen the truth of Dharmata directly and is essentially a siddha, such a person does not need to worry about these things. They're beyond all dualism. They don't think in terms of enemies and friends, danger and safety, or any of these things.
콩 넘버라 심바단 심발레 돌 사버래 너버 쟁여 요마래 마랑조 심바단 심바요래 디엔디 너버데 망보용거래 심바 심발레.
Because siddhas are free from fixation and craving, they cannot be harmed. Because we are engulfed by our fixation and craving, we are prey to every type of harm.
드랭가랑 상마 시기요래 스톰 레그라서 가서 가랑 소라 제진 축좀 보여로 근데게 되는 지금 너버게면 지금 레면서 나타기요래.
For example, today we're all worried about this upcoming storm. And we're worried about it because we're attached to our lives. We worry about it because we want to stay alive.
다 간대적으로 뒤집어져 저도록.
This is a song.
So time is run away. Maybe stop here. 1 or 2 questions. Welcome.
Okay. Cool. Do. Do.
Rinpoche, yesterday you mentioned that when renewing the practice of non-reification, one should purify one's body, speech and mind. Could you talk about how one will go about purifying?
Going to Magawada. Did Kasonke, Michike Joala, Gondroke, Zamshatne, Dadon, Gotson, and Digere La Digere Sonson. The Lunga Isonke, Dupa Jongo, Sombala, Korange Digoson, the Gondro Gomatso Gone, Lunga Isonke, Dupa Jongo, go at it.
That one 당원도 나라다 용가에 숨기 제바장에 탑체버도 봐봐도 당원도 인 세계열에 되는 지기네 갑독이 냠랭 간데 달들었던 줄에 소소.
Well, Ngondro itself is the best way of purifying obscurations of body, speech, and mind. But exactly what you practice depends upon what your principal practice is.
냠랭 가릴라이나한테 좀 고숨기.
Because really every practice includes means of purifying obscurations.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Welcome.
Then so after him, then you, and then done.
Thank you for blessing us with your presence and teaching. My question is for beginner students as myself. You mentioned about the importance of when recognizing a guru, specifically a lama, this lama needs to be realized. So how do you, as a beginner student, identify a lama who is realized and who wants to teach?
Lama takja tang juga layang, lama ki lama la takja tang, tanga lam sang manang. Then lama ki yang lama la taring bula ya na, then je tanya bula na te chide bala jan tang bu chuma juba jene, then lama de namdar lorju yak bu she ba je taring bula ya na, then lama de ki lama de zula keja yak bu jene, then lama de yak bu yin ma hago na, then la kazu taring bu na luge kale jam ne drone, lama tengyo re lot bela jawa na, lotang dawat.
Well, in the past, it was traditional for both the prospective teacher and the prospective disciple to examine each other before entering into a teacher-disciple relationship. And this could take some time. So on the part of the disciple, if they lived in the vicinity of the Lama, then they would examine their behavior, get to know them, before receiving any teaching from them. If they lived at a great distance from the prospective teacher, as was often the case in Tibet, where sometimes you had to travel for months or even years to get to the teacher you had selected, they would ask disciples of that teacher known to them about the Lama's behavior.
Lama ge loma ta ne loma la lamsan chön nang ge ma de ba me pyu ju ro yeme ta je tang ge de ka sa ba la lama chi ge de kong lo cha da ba ju de de la ba chön nang ge ma re lama ta pyo ni yo ne lama ya ko im ba shen na yang lo dang da wa la de ne ko ju ge re ne ya cha rang nyam ne ka zo che sa re la na de ha ko ge me mon jo ngaram ik thong sa ke ko ge yo sa ge re.
And the teacher would also test the prospective disciple in the same way. There is an eminent master still alive who will turn 100 this year, or has turned 100 in Nepal, who is famous or notorious for testing prospective disciples. In many cases, even well-known teachers, lamas, have come from Tibet to study with them. And he will put them off. He won't teach them immediately and will test them for a protracted period. In some cases, he said to them, well, I don't know how much practice you've really done, so you better do ngondro again where I can see it.
Thank you.
Okay. Then it samshana.
Che